Imagine you are transported back in time. You stand before towering stone walls, a massive drawbridge lowered across a dark moat. This is your destination, a medieval castle, a symbol of power and romance. But cast aside your storybook notions for a moment. What if I told you that surviving even a single day within these formidable walls would be an ordeal beyond your wildest imagination? The air is thick with unknown smells. Your modern senses reel. You are about to discover a world teeming with unexpected challenges, from the food on your plate to the very ground beneath your feet. Forget comfort, forget cleanliness. Prepare yourself, because we are stepping into a past where every breath, every meal, every encounter presents a threat you are simply not equipped to handle. Let us begin this journey into a truly unforgiving world. You take your first breath inside the castle walls, and it is not the fresh air of adventure you imagined. Instead, a complex, almost physical wave of odor washes over you, assaulting your modern senses with an intensity that makes your stomach lurch. This is not just one bad smell, it is a symphony of putrefaction, a thick, greasy blanket woven from 1,000 foul threads. Your eyes might be drawn to the towering keep or the bustling courtyard, but it is your nose that truly awakens you to the unforgiving reality of this medieval world. This omnipresent stench is the first and perhaps most immediate threat to your ability to merely exist here. The first, most prominent note in this olfactory nightmare is the unmistakable reek of human waste. You quickly realize that the idyllic image of a castle, pristine and imposing, entirely omits the crucial detail of how hundreds of people dealt with their most basic biological needs. Look around the courtyard. You will not find discreet, flushing toilets. What you will find are perhaps a few rudimentary latrines or garderobes, often little more than stone shafts emptying directly into the moat below, or into cesspits that are rarely, if ever, properly emptied. Imagine the cumulative effect of 100, 200, even 500 people relieving themselves day after day, year after year, with only the most basic provisions for disposal. The air around these openings is a perpetual miasma, a potent cocktail of ammonia and methane that would burn your nostrils and make your eyes water. But the human contribution is just one layer. Add to this the pervasive aroma of animals. The castle courtyard is not just for people. It is a living, breathing farmyard. You might see horses, their dung piles steaming gently, attracting a cloud of flies. There are likely pigs, kept in pens that are cleaned only sporadically, adding their particular brand of pungent earthiness to the mix. Chickens wander freely, leaving their droppings wherever they please. Dogs, many of them strays or working hounds, roam and relieve themselves with impunity. The ground beneath your feet, especially in high-traffic areas, is not solid stone, but rather a churned-up mixture of dirt, mud, animal manure, and whatever else has fallen or been discarded. Every step you take potentially stirs up new dormant odors, a constant reminder of the organic chaos that defines this space. Then there is the food, or rather, the remnants of it. While the kitchens might be a source of hearty smells, the general disposal of scraps and waste contributes significantly to the overall bouquet of decay. Bones, vegetable peelings, stale bread, and the occasional spoiled piece of meat are simply tossed out, often into the courtyard or into specific refuse piles that are infrequently removed. Remember, there is no modern refrigeration. Food spoils quickly, and the smell of fermenting or rotting organic matter is a constant presence. Flies, drawn by the promise of decay, buzz everywhere, landing on surfaces, on food, and perhaps even on you. They are not merely an annoyance, they are a constant, visible reminder of the unsanitary conditions. Beyond the immediate courtyard, imagine the specific industries that might exist within or just outside the castle walls. Perhaps there is a tannery processing animal hides into leather. The process of tanning often involves urine, lime, and animal brains, creating an unbelievably putrid odor that clings to everything and everyone nearby. Even a slight breeze can carry this acrid, stomach-churning smell across the entire castle grounds. Blacksmiths, while creating impressive works of metal, also contribute to the air quality with the acrid smoke of their forges and the smell of hot metal and coal. Now, consider the people themselves. Modern notions of daily bathing and hygiene simply did not exist for most medieval folk. A full body wash might be a rare event, perhaps once a week for the very wealthy, or even less frequently for the commoners and servants. You would be surrounded by the smell of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and clothing that has been worn for days or weeks without washing. Personal hygiene was rudimentary at best. Perfumes and strong spices were sometimes used by the nobility to mask these smells, but for the vast majority, the body odor of their neighbors was simply a fact of life. You, however, are not accustomed to this. The close proximity to so many unwashed individuals would be profoundly uncomfortable, perhaps even gag-inducing. And the air itself? It is not merely the accumulated stench. Smoke from cooking fires, heating braziers, and candles fills the interior spaces, clinging to tapestries, clothing, and hair. While romanticized in modern depictions, the reality of poorly ventilated stone buildings filled with smoke would be a constant irritant to your lungs and eyes. That smoky haze adds another layer to the heavy, stagnant atmosphere, making every breath feel thick and laden. Think about your own daily routine. You wake up, perhaps shower, put on clean clothes, eat food prepared in a clean kitchen, and spend your day in relatively odor-free environments. Here, from the moment you open your eyes, you are immersed in this overwhelming sensory assault. The smell would penetrate your clothes, your hair, even your skin. You would constantly be aware of it, and your modern brain, hardwired for cleanliness, would be screaming in protest. The sheer discomfort would be immense. Nausea, headaches, and a constant feeling of unease would likely be your companions. The medieval castle was not designed for your comfort or your delicate sensibilities. It was a fortress, a functional hub of activity, a place of survival and defense where efficiency often trumped hygiene. The people who lived here were born into this environment, their noses adapted, their expectations different. What to you is an unbearable assault, to them was simply the smell of life, the smell of their home. They might complain about particularly egregious odors, but the baseline of pungent humanity and animalia was their normal. You would quickly realize that escaping the smell is impossible. It is in the great hall where feasts are held, mingling with the aroma of roasted meat and ale. It is in the sleeping chambers, a blend of stale breath, unwashed linen, and residual cooking smoke. It is in the very stones of the castle walls, impregnated with centuries of accumulated smells. There is no fresh air to be found, no modern deodorizer, no escape. This constant sensory input would wear you down. The sheer effort of trying to ignore it, or the constant urge to flee, would drain your mental and physical energy. You would feel perpetually unclean, unable to truly relax or find respite. Your appetite might diminish not just from the quality of the food, but from the surrounding odors that make every meal a challenge. Your sleep might be disturbed by the lingering smells, the buzzing flies, and the general discomfort. This is the baseline, the fundamental layer of your medieval experience. Before you even consider the political intrigues, the dangers of combat, the unfamiliar social hierarchies, or the rudimentary medical practices, you must first contend with the very air you breathe. This pervasive, inescapable stench is your first, most visceral lesson in why you are utterly unprepared for life within these formidable, yet deeply unhygienic walls. It is a constant, grinding assault on your modern sensibilities, a potent reminder that survival here demands a complete recalibration of your understanding of comfort, cleanliness, and indeed, what it means to simply exist. You have contended with the pervasive, inescapable stench, the very air you breathe, an assault on your modern sensibilities. Now, as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the castle's gray stone in hues of orange and fading to purple, a new challenge emerges, one that will test not just your stomach, but your very will to survive. It is time for a meal, a concept so fundamental to human existence. Yet here it transforms into a grim lottery, a daily gamble with your health and your life. The call to dinner is not a gentle invitation. Perhaps a servant shouts down a corridor or a bell tolls, its clang echoing through the stone halls, carrying with it the promise of sustenance and the dread of what it might entail. You follow the sparse crowd, your footsteps heavy on cold flagstones, the air growing thick with the smell of wood smoke, roasting meat, and something else less pleasant, a faint sourness that clings to everything. You find yourself in the great hall, the very heart of the castle's social life, yet far from the opulent scenes you might imagine. It is vast, yes, and draughty. Tapestries, faded and worn, might hang on some walls, doing little to block the chill that seeps through the stone. Torches flicker in their sconces, casting dancing shadows and leaving the distant corners cloaked in perpetual gloom. The hall is noisy, a cacophony of voices, clanking dishes, and the barking of dogs, ever present, ever hoping for a dropped morsel. The air is heavy, a blend of human breath, damp earth, old food, and the acrid smoke from the central hearth. Your place at the table is determined by your rank, a stark reminder of the rigid social hierarchy. You are not at the high table, that much is certain. That is reserved for the lord, his lady, and their most esteemed guests or closest advisors. You are likely seated at one of the long trestle tables, made of rough-hewn timber, crowded shoulder to shoulder with others of similar standing. Space is a luxury and privacy is an unknown concept. You feel the constant nudge of an elbow, the warmth of another body pressed against yours, the murmur of conversation swirling around you, much of it unintelligible. Look at the table before you. There are no individual plates, no gleaming cutlery. Your meal arrives on large, communal platters or in wooden bowls. You might be offered a trencher, a thick slice of stale bread that serves as your plate, absorbing the juices and gravies, often eaten at the end of the meal or given to the dogs. Your only utensil is your dagger, strapped to your belt, or perhaps a rough wooden spoon. Forks are a rare, almost unheard of luxury, considered an affectation by most. You eat with your hands as do those around you. Fingers, often unwashed, delve into shared dishes. Etiquette, by modern standards, is non-existent. The food itself arrives and your stomach clenches. Imagine the common fare. Forget fresh, vibrant vegetables. In the depths of winter, most produce is gone. What remains are root vegetables, stored for months, possibly rotting in places, and whatever can be dried or salted. The mainstays are pottage and bread. Pottage is a thick stew, the staple of the medieval diet, a watery, often greasy concoction simmered for hours over an open fire. Its ingredients are a grim lottery. You might find scraps of whatever meat was available that day, often tough, stringy, or heavily salted. Vegetables could include cabbages, onions, leeks, or peas, all boiled into a gray, unappetizing mush. Herbs are used not for delicate flavoring, but sometimes to mask the taste of food that is past its prime. The consistency is less a stew, more a gruel, a bland, monotonous offering designed purely for sustenance. The bread is heavy, dark, and hard. It is made from coarse grains, perhaps rye or barley, often mixed with other less palatable fillers if the harvest was poor. It is nothing like the light, airy loaves you are accustomed to. It is dense, difficult to chew, and often stale. You tear off chunks with your hands, using it to scoop up your pottage, or gnaw at it to fill the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. Meat, for most, is not a daily occurrence, and when it is served, it is often preserved. Salted beef, dried fish, or heavily smoked pork are common. The salt content is staggering, a necessity for preservation in a world without refrigeration. You crave water constantly, but even that is a risk. Fresh game might be available to the lord, but the cuts you receive, if any, are often the less desirable, full of gristle and bone. Consider the kitchen where this food is prepared. It is a smoky, chaotic realm, a breeding ground for bacteria and disease. Open fires are the cooking method, meaning soot and ash are constant companions to every dish. Water for cooking and washing is drawn from wells or rivers, often contaminated by human and animal waste. Hands once again are the primary tools. Hygiene as you understand it, is a concept far in the future. Rats and mice scurry through the shadows, attracted by the abundant scraps. Flies swarm, landing on every surface, every morsel. The possibility of food poisoning is not a rare occurrence. It is a persistent, underlying threat with every bite you take. A sudden stomach cramp, a bout of vomiting, or a fever could easily turn fatal in a world with no antibiotics. And what do you drink? Not water, not usually. Clean drinking water is a rare luxury, often indistinguishable from the stagnant, contaminated sources that breed illness. Instead, you drink ale, cider, or weak beer, even the children. The fermentation process in these beverages kills many of the pathogens that thrive in untreated water, making them a safer, though mind-altering, alternative. The taste is rough, often cloudy, and far from the crisp, clean drinks of your modern world. Wine is reserved for the nobility, and even then, its quality is wildly inconsistent, often watered down or spoiled. This diet, while providing some calories, is woefully inadequate by modern nutritional standards. The lack of fresh fruits and vegetables means a constant battle with vitamin deficiencies. Scurvy, a debilitating illness caused by a lack of vitamin C, is common, leaving you with bleeding gums, aching joints, and profound weakness. Rickets from lack of vitamin D deforms bones. Anemia from insufficient iron saps your strength and leaves you perpetually tired. Your teeth, without proper care or diet, would quickly rot and fall out, leaving you in constant pain. Every meal is a potential source of parasitic infection. Worms of various types are endemic, thriving in the unhygienic conditions and poor food preparation. You might not see them, but they are there, silently robbing your body of nutrients, causing chronic digestive issues, and slowly draining your vitality. The psychological impact of this constant culinary roulette is profound. Eating, which in your modern life is often a source of pleasure and comfort, becomes an act of mere survival. You approach each meal with a sense of dread, wondering if this will be the one that lays you low. There is no joy in discovery, no anticipation of delicate flavors, only the primal need to fill your stomach and hope you do not get sick. Imagine the dull ache of constant hunger even after a meal because the food is not truly nourishing. Imagine the stomach discomfort, the gas, the bloating, the diarrhea, all considered normal by those around you, but utterly agonizing for your unprepared body. Your digestive system, accustomed to processed and carefully regulated foods, would stage a full-blown rebellion. This is not the romanticized feast of legend. This is sustenance, scraped together, prepared with indifference to hygiene, and consumed in an environment that is anything but appetizing. Your palate, your stomach, your entire digestive system would be under siege, battered by unfamiliar textures, rancid flavors, and the omnipresent threat of illness. You would yearn for a simple glass of clean water, a crisp apple, a slice of fresh, wholesome bread. But such luxuries are figments of a future that has not yet arrived. You would quickly come to understand that surviving a day in a medieval castle means not just enduring the stench, the cold, and the social stratification, but also confronting the very real possibility that your next meal could be your last, or at the very least, leave you terribly, debilitatingly ill. Your modern body, unaccustomed to such bacterial onslaughts, such nutritional deprivation, and such a constant low-grade assault on its systems, would simply not cope. It is a slow, insidious form of betrayal, served up daily on a wooden trencher, transforming the most basic human need into an act of profound courage and grim determination. Every bite you take is a testament to resilience, but also a whisper of how easily you could succumb. Your struggle for survival within the castle walls extends far beyond the confines of a meager meal or the invisible war waged inside your intestines. You see, a medieval castle, for all its imposing stone and lofty towers, is not a sanctuary. It is a fortress, yes, but one constantly poised on the knife edge of existence, a monument to the brutal realities of war. Imagine standing on a cold, windswept rampart. The air bites at your exposed skin, and the distant horizon, once a symbol of freedom, now feels like a cage, defining the limits of your precarious world. Your eyes scan the landscape not for beauty but for threats. Every shadow, every distant movement, every unusual sound sends a prickle of dread up your spine. This is the constant, low-humming anxiety of life in a medieval stronghold. The ever-present awareness that at any moment, your world could ignite in a storm of steel and fire. You are behind the moat, an essential first line of defense. But do not envision some idyllic, tranquil waterway. This moat is a man-made chasm, often deep and wide, its murky waters sometimes concealing hidden stakes, its banks frequently steep and lined with sharpened obstacles. It is not merely a deterrent, it is a death trap, designed to halt the advance of an enemy, to break their formation, to force them into a vulnerable bottleneck under a hail of arrows and stones. Falling in means a near certain ignoble end, weighed down by your armor, impaled by unseen dangers, or drowned in the cold, dark mud. Even if you escaped the water, you would then face the sheer, unforgiving climb up the castle walls. Above the moat, the drawbridge stands as your only controlled link to the outside world. It is a massive, heavy structure, creaking and groaning as it is raised and lowered by a complex system of chains and counterweights. When it is up, you are isolated. When it is down, you are exposed. The sound of its massive timbers echoing across the courtyard as it is secured for the night is a nightly reminder of your confinement, and of the world that waits beyond. Now turn your gaze to the walls themselves. They are not merely tall, they are monstrously thick, often many feet across at their base, tapering as they climb skyward. These are not decorative facades. They are battlements, built to absorb the kinetic energy of siege engines, to withstand the persistent assault of picks and hammers. You can feel the cold, rough stone beneath your fingertips, a testament to countless hours of back-breaking labor. But for all their strength, they offer only a precarious sense of security. They are a barrier, yes, but also a canvas upon which the stories of countless sieges have been written in blood and shattered stone. Look closely at the narrow openings cut into the stone at regular intervals. These are not windows. These are arrow slits, strategically angled to allow defenders to rain down projectiles upon attackers with minimal exposure. Imagine peering through one of these, the world outside compressed into a lethal sliver of vision. You would feel the rush of cold air, hear the distant shouts and clangs of training, and know that your life and the lives of everyone within these walls depends on your aim, your readiness, and the collective will to defend this stone shell. As you walk along the ramparts, you would notice the battlements, the crenellations, the very teeth of the castle. These alternating high and low sections provide cover for archers and crossbowmen, allowing them to reload and reposition without being fully exposed. You would learn the rhythm of this defense: shoot, duck, reload, shoot again. It is a brutal, repetitive dance with death. The most formidable and paradoxically the most vulnerable point of any castle is its gatehouse. This is where the enemy concentrates their efforts, and where the defenders make their most desperate stand. As you pass through the main gate, you are not simply walking through an opening in the wall. You are navigating a labyrinth of lethal intent. Above you in the ceiling you might spot dark, square openings. These are murder holes. Imagine standing directly beneath one as boiling water, scalding sand, or heavy stones are dropped through, aimed at the heads of anyone foolish enough to breach the outer defenses. The thought alone is enough to send a shiver down your spine. You would pass through not one but perhaps 2 or 3 massive wooden doors, each reinforced with iron bands and studded with spikes. Behind these, a formidable portcullis, a heavy iron or wooden grate, would be ready to drop with a terrifying clang, designed to trap or crush any who dare to force their way in. This layered defense means that even if the outer gate is breached, the enemy is immediately confronted with another obstacle, another kill zone. The air here feels heavy with the echoes of past struggles, of lives lost in the name of defense. Beyond the static defenses, there are the living, breathing defenders, the castle garrison. These are not just soldiers, they are the heart of the castle's survival mechanism. They live a life of constant vigilance, drilled relentlessly in the arts of warfare. You would hear the clang of steel on steel from the practice yard, the shouts of commands, the thud of arrows hitting targets. Their days are spent in readiness, their nights in uneasy watch. You would quickly learn to recognize the faces of the guards, their grim determination, their weary resolve. Your own safety would depend entirely on their skill, their discipline, and their willingness to die for the castle. And then there is the siege. Not a hypothetical threat, but a brutal, drawn-out reality that every castle dweller lives in fear of. Imagine the moment the distant alarm sounds, the desperate cry of, "Enemy at the gates." You would feel the adrenaline surge, the cold knot in your stomach. The world outside would transform from a distant threat into an immediate, overwhelming danger. The days and weeks that follow would be a waking nightmare. You would hear the relentless thud of trebuchets launching massive stones, each impact shaking the very foundations of the castle, sending tremors through your bones. The air would be thick with the dust of shattered masonry, the acrid smell of smoke from fires set by incendiary projectiles. You would watch in horror as siege towers, like monstrous wooden beasts, lumbered towards the walls, their ramps ready to spill armed men onto your battlements. The soundscape of a siege is a symphony of terror. The agonizing creak of battering rams relentlessly pounding against the gates, trying to splinter the heavy timbers. The frantic shouts of commanders, the piercing whistle of arrows, the dull thud of crossbow bolts finding their mark, the screams of the wounded. You would see men fall, hear their last gasps, and know that your own turn could come at any moment. But the enemy does not only attack with force. They also attack with patience. A siege is a war of attrition, a test of endurance. You would experience the slow, insidious creep of hunger as supplies dwindle. The water, already questionable, would become even more precious, more guarded. Disease, an ever-present specter in medieval life, would flourish in the cramped, unsanitary conditions of a besieged castle, preying on weakened bodies and minds. Dysentery, typhus, the plague itself, could decimate the defenders far more effectively than any siege engine. The psychological toll would be immense. The constant stress, the lack of sleep, the omnipresent fear, would grind down even the strongest will. You would witness moments of bravery and acts of utter desperation. Hope would flicker, often extinguished by another barrage, another successful breach attempt. Consider the injuries you might sustain. A glancing blow from a stone, an arrow wound, a fall from the ramparts. There is no modern medicine here. No antibiotics for infection, no sterile surgery, no pain relief beyond a potent draught of ale or a prayer. A simple cut could turn gangrenous, a broken bone could lead to lifelong disability or amputation. Survival of the injury would be only the first hurdle. Survival of the subsequent infection would be an even greater one. If the castle fell, your fate would be grim. Capture often meant torture, ransom, or execution. Women and children faced their own horrors. There was no Geneva Convention, no rules of engagement beyond the whim of the victor. The brutality of medieval warfare was absolute, unsparing. Your modern sensibilities, your expectation of safety, your understanding of basic human rights, would be utterly shattered. You would find yourself in a world where survival is a daily negotiation with death, where the line between defender and victim is thin and easily crossed. You might believe your wit, your knowledge, your physical fitness could save you. But against a battering ram, against a hail of arrows, against the relentless gnawing of starvation, or the invisible assault of disease, these advantages would quickly evaporate. A medieval castle, in its brutal business of defense, demands a kind of resilience, a primal ferocity, that the modern world has long forgotten. You would not just be fighting an enemy, you would be fighting for every breath, every drop of water, every sliver of hope in a world designed to crush you. Your only allies would be the stone around you and the grim determination of those beside you, all locked in a desperate struggle to hold back an overwhelming tide of destruction. You stand within the castle walls, the stone around you a grim and unyielding promise. You have heard the stories, seen the pictures of grand halls and bustling courtyards. You imagine a life of fortified security, a bastion against the chaos of the outside world. But the reality you would quickly discover is a chilling embrace, a daily negotiation not just with external threats, but with the very fabric of existence within these formidable structures. The resilience demanded of you here is not merely for battle. It is for every moment of every day, a constant struggle against the environment itself. You step further inside, away from the deceptive warmth of a fleeting sunbeam. Immediately, a pervasive, bone-deep cold wraps itself around you. The massive stone walls, so imposing from the outside, are not insulators of comfort. They are giant sponges, drawing in the winter's chill, clinging to the dampness of the earth, and radiating it back into every chamber, every corridor. You might be accustomed to climate control, to central heating that chases away the slightest shiver. Here you learn the true meaning of cold. It seeps into your clothing, settles in your bones, and never truly leaves. Fireplaces, even in the Lord's great hall, are inefficient, smoke-belching orifices. You watch the smoke billow out, much of it escaping into the room before reluctantly finding its way up the chimney. Your eyes sting. Your throat catches. The heat, when it comes, is localized, a small circle of transient warmth that quickly dissipates the moment you move away. You shiver, pulling your rough woolen tunic tighter, but it offers little defense against the drafts that snake through every arrow slit, every ill-fitting wooden door, every crack in the ancient masonry. The wind whistles a mournful tune through the narrow openings, a constant reminder of the world outside and the struggle within. Dampness is your constant companion. The castle breathes a heavy, musty air. You feel it in your clothes, which never quite dry. You taste it in the water. You see it as dark patches of mold blooming in forgotten corners, a visible manifestation of the pervasive moisture that clings to everything. Your bed, if you are lucky enough to have one that is not just a straw pallet on the floor, feels perpetually clammy. The straw mattress, shared with unseen creatures, offers little relief from the biting chill. This persistent dampness is not just uncomfortable. It is a slow, insidious attacker of your health. You develop a chronic cough. Your joints ache. Your skin feels perpetually clammy and cold. Illness, often brought on by exposure and weakened defenses, is not an exception. It is an expectation. Now consider the simple act of bodily relief. You seek out a latrine, or more accurately, a garderobe. You find a small dark recess built into the wall, a wooden seat with a hole opening directly downwards. There is no flushing mechanism, no porcelain, no privacy beyond the meager stone walls. A chill draft rises from the shaft below, carrying with it a stench that assaults your senses. The waste simply drops, often into the moat, or into a cesspit at the base of the wall, where it accumulates, a breeding ground for disease and a constant source of foul odor. You hold your breath, perform your necessary function as quickly as possible, and retreat, the smell clinging to your clothing, your hair. Personal hygiene as you know it does not exist. A full bath is a luxury of unimaginable extravagance, perhaps once a year for the highest nobility, and then often involving hauling buckets of heated water to a wooden tub. For the vast majority, washing means a quick scrub with cold water, perhaps a little soap made from animal fat and lye, if you are lucky, and only for your hands and face. Your body, your clothes, accumulate grime, sweat, and the pervasive smells of the castle. You quickly realize you are never truly clean. This is a world where fleas and lice are not just an annoyance. They are an unavoidable reality, shared by everyone from the lowliest servant to the highest lord. You learn to scratch without thinking, to pick at unseen creatures, a constant, irritating companion. The castle is also a crowded place. Even in times of peace, a bustling fortress houses not just the lord and his family, but dozens if not hundreds of soldiers, servants, artisans and their families. Privacy is a concept utterly foreign to this era. You sleep in shared quarters, sometimes in a great hall with dozens of others, or perhaps a small room with several companions. The constant presence of others, their breathing, their snoring, their rustling, their smells, becomes a part of the background noise of your existence. There is no quiet retreat, no personal space to call your own. Every conversation, every movement, is observed, heard, and potentially judged. Then there are the smells. Oh, the smells. They are a symphony of the unpleasant. The sharp, acrid tang of wood smoke constantly in the air. The faint, persistent odor of human waste from the garderobes. The pungent aroma of stables, animal dung, and unwashed horses. The greasy scent of cooking fires, often mingled with the faint, unsettling smell of decaying food. The damp, earthy odor of the stone itself, mixed with the sweat and grime of hundreds of unwashed bodies. You breathe it all in every day, every night. Your modern sensibilities would reel, your stomach would churn. But here, it is simply the air you breathe, a constant, inescapable assault on your olfactory senses. You would grow accustomed to it, perhaps, but the initial shock would be profound. Food, when it comes, is a matter of sustenance, not pleasure. Your diet is monotonous and unvaried, dictated by the seasons and the castle stores. You eat thick, coarse bread, often stale. You consume salted meat, stringy and tough, or perhaps dried fish revived in water. Vegetables are seasonal and limited, often root crops stored in cellars. Spices, a luxury, are rare, reserved for the highest tables. The concept of fresh produce, of a varied and balanced meal, is alien. You eat to live, to fuel your body for the unending labor and the constant chill. Food poisoning is a common affliction, a severe stomach upset that can quickly turn deadly in a world without modern medicine. The water you drink, drawn from a well or cistern, is often brackish, tainted, or simply unsafe. Ale or watered-down wine becomes the default, not for enjoyment, but because the fermentation process makes it marginally safer to consume than plain water. Darkness is another oppressive force within these stone walls. Windows are few and small, mere slits designed for defense, not for admitting light. Even on the brightest days, the interior of the castle remains dim and shadowed. As dusk falls, the darkness descends swiftly and completely. Candles are expensive, made from beeswax for the wealthy or tallow for the common folk, and they burn quickly, producing more smoke than light. Rushlights, reeds dipped in animal fat, offer a flickering, barely adequate glow. Your world shrinks to the immediate radius of a single flame. Reading, writing, or any detailed task becomes nearly impossible after sunset. The long hours of darkness are not a time for quiet contemplation, but for a different kind of endurance, a test of your mental fortitude against the encroaching shadows and the constant hum of life around you. The sheer scale of the castle, which once seemed so impressive, now feels crushing. These colossal walls, built to protect, also imprison. You are always inside, always surrounded by stone, by dampness, by the pervasive smells. There is no escape from the routine, the monotony, the physical discomfort. Your modern mind, accustomed to comfort, to cleanliness, to personal space and readily available nourishment, would quickly find itself overwhelmed. You would yearn for a soft bed, a hot bath, a fresh meal, the simple luxury of silence and privacy. The constant low-level discomfort, the lack of stimulation beyond the immediate struggle for existence, the unyielding nature of the stone itself, all combine to erode your spirit. You are not just facing the threat of siege, you are fighting a slow, grinding war against the very environment you inhabit. The castle, in its stoic grandeur, demands your absolute subservience to its brutal reality. It offers stone-cold comfort, indeed, a comfort found only in the knowledge that for all its harshness, it is your only shield against an even more hostile world beyond its walls. You would not last a day. Your body would ache, your stomach would churn, your mind would rebel against the relentless, unforgiving reality of a medieval castle. This is not a romantic fortress. It is a cage of stone, demanding everything and offering almost nothing in return but a brutal, desperate chance at survival. You have navigated the cold, the hunger, the relentless physical toll of the stone and the damp. You have felt your spirit begin to erode under the weight of such harsh existence. But now you must contend with an army of residents far more numerous and infinitely less welcome than your fellow humans. These are the crawling, scurrying, buzzing, biting citizens of the castle, an entire ecosystem thriving in the very spaces you inhabit, demanding a share of your food, your warmth, and even your blood. Imagine for a moment the very air around you. It is not clean, not fresh, not the purified breeze you take for granted in your own time. Instead, it is a thick, humid envelope, laden with the odors of unwashed bodies, stale cooking fat, animal waste, and a pervasive, sickening sweetness of decay. And within this air, upon the rough stone floor, inside the cracks of the timber beams, under your very bed of straw, lies a teeming, unseen world. Your modern senses, so accustomed to hygiene and sanitation, recoil instantly. You are accustomed to a world where pests are a rare nuisance, quickly eradicated. Here they are a fundamental, unavoidable part of life. They are not merely present, they are ubiquitous. Let us start with the most obvious invaders, the ones that gnaw and scurry. Rats and mice are not just occasional sightings. They are an ever-present, audacious force. You hear them at night, a constant rustling and scratching behind the walls, in the ceiling, in the storerooms where your meager food supplies are kept. You see them during the day, darting across the great hall floor, bold and unafraid, growing fat on spilled scraps and unguarded provisions. They are not just a nuisance, they are a direct threat. They contaminate food with their droppings and urine, spreading disease with every exploratory journey. They gnaw through sacks of grain, through leather, through textiles. Imagine waking to find a portion of your precious, meager bread ration nibbled away by unseen teeth, leaving behind a telltale trail of dark pellets. The sheer audacity of these creatures, living alongside humans as equals, would be a constant psychological strain. You are never truly alone. Then there are the personal invaders, the ones that cling to your body, making every moment an exercise in persistent itching. Fleas and lice are a universal experience in the medieval castle, irrespective of your status. The straw you sleep on teems with them. The rough wool of your clothing provides a perfect habitat. Your hair, unwashed for weeks or even months, becomes a veritable paradise for these tiny, biting parasites. You would feel them, a constant, irritating crawl and bite, sending prickles of itchiness across your scalp, down your arms, over your torso. The relief of scratching is fleeting, only to be replaced by another wave of irritation. You would see others scratching constantly, an almost unconscious habit, their fingers digging at their heads or delving under their garments. The shame, the discomfort, the relentless feeling of being unclean and infested would be an oppressive burden. These are not merely an annoyance. They are a part of your being, feeding off your very skin, a living testament to the lack of personal hygiene that defines castle life. The diseases they carry, typhus from lice, plague from fleas, are an invisible, ever-present threat. And it does not stop there. Flies, drawn by the pervasive stench of waste and decaying matter, buzz incessantly. They land on your food, on your face, on any open wound. In the kitchens, they swarm over exposed meats and vegetables. In the great hall, they circle the unwashed trenchers. Cockroaches scuttle in the darker, warmer corners, particularly around the kitchen and latrine areas. Spiders spin webs in every archway and crevice, catching other insects but adding to the overall sense of neglect and decay. The very structure of the castle, with its deep, uncleaned corners, its damp stone, and its constant human and animal presence, provides an ideal breeding ground for microbial life you cannot see but whose effects are devastating. Mold grows on damp walls, adding to the musty, cloying smell. Bacteria thrive in every unclean surface, every puddle of spillage, every drop of waste. And where does all this waste go? The castle has no sophisticated sewage system. For the most part, human waste is dealt with via garderobes, which are essentially stone chutes built into the wall. You would step into a small dark recess, relieve yourself, and the waste would drop straight down into a cesspit at the base of the wall, or if you were lucky, directly into the castle moat or a river. But these chutes are rarely cleaned. The smell emanating from them is overpowering, particularly on a warm day, a foul miasma that pervades the nearby chambers. The cesspits themselves overflow, contaminating the groundwater, attracting rats and breeding countless flies. Animal waste from the stables, the kennels, and the various animals kept within the castle walls is often just left to accumulate in courtyards or designated dung heaps, sometimes cleared, but often left for extended periods, drawing more insects and adding to the general stench. Kitchen waste, bones, discarded food scraps, all too often just get thrown out into the courtyard, or left in uncovered pits, further fueling the rat population and decaying under the sun. The sheer, overwhelming smell of the medieval castle would assault you constantly. It is a multi-layered stench. The sour smell of unwashed bodies and sweat, the sharp tang of urine and feces, the heavy, sweet odor of decay from refuse and sometimes poorly preserved food, the earthy, damp smell of straw and stone, and the acrid smoke from the hearths. You would quickly discover that there is no escape from it. It would cling to your clothes, to your hair, to the very lining of your nose. Your modern expectation of fresh air would be a laughable fantasy. This pervasive odor is not just unpleasant. It is a constant reminder of the lack of control, the lack of cleanliness, and the ever-present threat of disease. And disease, of course, is the ultimate consequence of this crawling court of uninvited guests and the pervasive lack of sanitation. Dysentery, a violent and debilitating illness spread by contaminated food and water, would be commonplace. Fevers, often a symptom of underlying infections carried by fleas or lice, would sweep through the castle, leaving many weakened or dead. Skin infections, festering sores from insect bites and cuts, would be a constant concern, with little in the way of effective treatment. The Black Death, which devastated Europe in the 14th century, was a stark and terrifying reminder of the power of these unseen enemies, carried by fleas on rats. To live in a medieval castle is to live in a constant state of low-grade illness, where your body is always fighting off some infection, always carrying some parasite. Your sophisticated immune system, accustomed to a world where childhood diseases are vaccinated against and common infections are treated with antibiotics, would be completely overwhelmed. A simple cut could turn into a life-threatening infection. A bout of stomach cramps could escalate into fatal dysentery. The sheer biological burden of living in such close proximity to so much filth, so many parasites, and so many unseen pathogens would quickly deplete your body's defenses. You might survive the cold, the hunger, the boredom. But the relentless assault on your senses, the pervasive itching, the constant fear of disease, the sheer volume of crawling, scuttling, buzzing life sharing your every space, this would be the true breaking point. Your modern mind, conditioned for comfort and cleanliness, would rebel against the unavoidable, tangible reality of living in a vast stone insectarium. You would yearn for a moment of true solitude, a breath of truly clean air, a single night free from the rustling and the biting. You would not last a day. Your body would ache, your stomach would churn, your mind would rebel against the relentless, unforgiving reality of a medieval castle, made infinitely worse by the teeming, uninvited guests in every single corner. Your body would ache, your stomach would churn, your mind would rebel against the relentless, unforgiving reality of a medieval castle, made infinitely worse by the teeming, uninvited guests in every single corner. But even if you could somehow acclimate to the pervasive filth, the constant chill, and the invisible microbial wars waging within you, a far more insidious and inescapable challenge would emerge: the rigid, unforgiving social structure of the castle itself. You would not survive a day because your very identity, your sense of self, would be stripped away and replaced by a preordained role within a vast living machine. Imagine stepping from the chaotic, buzzing filth of the courtyard into a silence that is not really silence at all, but a hushed, reverent awareness of power. Every person you encounter, from the lowliest scullion to the haughty knight, moves with a purpose dictated by an invisible web of command and fealty. You are not a free agent here. You are not an individual with aspirations and choices. You are a component, a function, a necessary part of the castle's continuous operation. Your life, your labor, your very breath, belongs to the lord or lady who holds absolute sway over this stone domain. You would quickly learn that privacy is a luxury reserved only for the very highest, and even then, it is a fleeting commodity. There are no private bedrooms with lockable doors for the vast majority of the castle inhabitants. You would sleep in communal chambers, perhaps on a straw mattress on the floor, sharing the space, the sounds, and the smells with dozens of others. Your waking hours would be just as public. Every task, every meal, every moment of your day would be observed, assessed, and dictated by someone higher up the chain. Consider your place. Are you a stable hand? Then your days begin before dawn, shoveling manure, feeding horses, and cleaning tack until your hands are raw and your muscles scream. Your clothes would reek of horse and sweat, a smell that never truly leaves you. Are you a laundress? Then you would spend hours by the cold, muddy river or in a dank washroom, scrubbing heavy wool garments by hand, battling stains and enduring the biting cold. Are you a scullion, lowest on the kitchen hierarchy? Then your hands would be perpetually immersed in greasy, cold water, scrubbing pots and pans, facing the constant wrath of the cooks, and enduring the intense heat of the massive hearth. The sheer volume of work required to keep a castle functioning is staggering, and it is entirely reliant on human labor. There are no machines to assist you. Every single task, no matter how small or arduous, must be done by hand. You would see women spinning wool day in and day out, their fingers calloused and eyes strained. You would see men hauling stone, chopping wood, or sharpening swords from sunup to sundown. Your modern body, accustomed to convenience and specialized labor, would quickly break under the relentless physical demands of this era. There are no sick days, no workers' compensation, no ergonomic workstations. You work until you can no longer stand and then you are replaced. Beyond the physical toil, the mental burden of constant deference would be crushing. Every interaction is governed by strict social etiquette. You must know your place and you must stay in it. You cannot speak unless spoken to, and even then your words must be carefully chosen, respectful, and brief. You cannot make eye contact with your superiors for too long. You must bow, curtsy, or kneel at the appropriate moments. A misstep, a perceived disrespect, or even an accidental gesture could lead to severe punishment, from a public beating to banishment, which for you would be a death sentence. Your modern mind, steeped in notions of equality and individual rights, would find this system abhorrent. You are not expected to question, to innovate, or to express personal opinions. Your value is purely in your utility, in your unwavering obedience to the system. The castle functions because everyone understands and accepts their role, and because everyone understands the consequences of failing to perform it. Let us trace a day in this existence. You are woken before dawn, not by an alarm, but by the general stirrings of the communal chamber, the distant clang of the blacksmith, or the crowing of roosters. You dress in your rough, simple garments, which you likely slept in. There is no time for leisurely ablutions. A quick splash of cold water on your face, if you are lucky enough to have access to it, is all you might manage. Then straight to your assigned task. For hours you toil. Perhaps you are a chambermaid, emptying chamber pots, sweeping rushes, and laying fresh herbs to mask the ever-present stench. Perhaps you are a kitchen helper, gutting fish, plucking chickens, or kneading dough, your hands perpetually grimy. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and often disgusting. Your only breaks might be short, hurried meals of coarse bread, perhaps some watery pottage eaten quickly and silently, often standing or squatting, always aware of the watchful eyes of your superiors. As the sun begins to set, your labors do not necessarily cease. Many tasks continue into the evening, illuminated by flickering rushlights or beeswax candles, a costly luxury. You might be mending clothes by dim light, preparing food for the next day, or serving at the Lord's table, standing for hours, attentive to every signal, every unspoken command. The noise of the castle, which has been a constant hum of activity all day, slowly quiets, but the silence is not one of peace. It is a silence pregnant with the potential for danger, for watchfulness. When you finally collapse onto your shared sleeping space, your body would be exhausted, your mind numb. There is no entertainment in the modern sense, no books, no music unless it is played by the castle's own musicians, no personal time to pursue your own interests. Your entire being is subsumed by the castle's needs. Your dreams, if you have any, might be filled with the endless chores, the stern faces of your overseers, or the fear of a misstep. The concept of loyalty in this world is not a choice, it is an absolute. You are bound to your lord or lady by birth, by feudal contract, or by the sheer necessity of survival. Your loyalty is your only currency, your only safeguard. To be disloyal, to plot against your lord, or even to harbor rebellious thoughts, is an act punishable by death, often a brutal and public one designed to instill terror in others. You would hear stories, perhaps even witness such punishments, which would serve as a constant, stark reminder of the consequences of challenging the established order. Your modern notions of personal freedom, of the right to choose your profession, your living situation, or your daily activities, would simply not exist. You are born into a certain station and you largely remain there. Upward mobility is rare and often requires extraordinary circumstances, such as valor in battle or exceptional service. But even then your ascent would be limited by your birth. You are part of a rigid social pyramid, and your position is near the bottom. Beyond the relentless labor and the suffocating social hierarchy, there is the constant psychological toll of being a nobody, of having no voice, no agency. Your existence is defined by service, by obedience. Your desires are irrelevant. Your comfort is not a consideration. Your very identity is merged with your function within the castle's intricate machinery. You would yearn for a moment of quiet reflection, a chance to make a decision for yourself, a single breath of true independence. But such moments would be impossible to find. Every space is shared, every minute accounted for, every thought potentially scrutinized. The weight of this complete lack of autonomy, combined with the physical hardships and the pervasive threat of disease, would be an unbearable burden. Your modern self, accustomed to the dignity of individual choice, the freedom of expression, and the expectation of personal space, would find itself utterly lost, suffocated, and eventually broken by the chains of command that define life within a medieval castle. You would not last a day. You would be crushed not just by the physical demands, but by the relentless psychological assault of being a mere tool in someone else's grand design. The psychological assault of being a mere tool, as you have just learned, would be crushing. But it would be compounded, amplified, and made truly terrifying by the ever-present, tangible shadow of death that stretched over every corner of a medieval castle. You would not last a day, not only because your spirit would break, but because your very body would face a relentless onslaught of dangers that modern life has all but erased. The Grim Reaper was not an abstract concept in the Middle Ages. He was a constant companion, his scythe always at the ready, poised to strike from 1,000 unexpected angles. Step with me now, if you dare, into the unfiltered reality of your medieval existence, where danger lurked in the very air you breathed, the water you drank, and the ground you walked upon. Forget the romanticized notions of valiant knights and grand feasts. For you, life in a castle would be a tightrope walk over an abyss of infection, accident, and brutal violence. Consider first the most insidious killer, disease. You would be living in a festering petri dish, an ecosystem of filth and contagion. Personal hygiene as you understand it simply did not exist. Bathing was infrequent, a luxury for the privileged, and even then often shared water or communal tubs were used. Imagine a world without soap, without antiperspirant, without regular changes of clean clothes. The stench alone would be overwhelming, a heavy, cloying miasma of unwashed bodies, stale food, animal waste, and overflowing latrines. Yes, latrines. For the vast majority, these were often little more than holes in the wall, emptying directly into the moat or a cesspit below, or perhaps a simple bucket system that was emptied only periodically. The great hall, where you might eat and socialize, would be covered in rushes to absorb spilled food and animal droppings, and these rushes would only be changed when they became truly unbearable, accumulating layers of refuse, attracting every imaginable pest. Rats, mice, fleas, lice. These would be your constant, uninvited companions. They would scurry through the walls, nest in your bedding, and feast on your discarded scraps. Each bite, each scratch, each fleeting contact carried the potential for deadly infection. The Black Death, for example, was just one of many plagues carried by these vermin. Typhus, dysentery, smallpox, measles, diphtheria, tuberculosis. These were not distant threats but ever-present realities, cycling through the castle population with ruthless efficiency. One cough, one sneeze, one shared meal could seal your fate. You would have no understanding of germs, no concept of how these diseases spread. You would attribute them to bad air, divine displeasure, or witchcraft, utterly helpless against their invisible onslaught. A fever, a persistent cough, a stomach upset that you would dismiss today with an over-the-counter remedy, would be a death sentence then. And what about the water you drank? It would likely be drawn from a well within the castle walls or a nearby stream. Neither would be purified. Both would be susceptible to contamination from human and animal waste, dead animals, or simply the general refuse of a densely populated, unsanitary environment. The constant risk of dysentery, a horrific disease that would leave you weak, dehydrated, and rapidly wasting away, was just another part of daily life. For the modern you, accustomed to potable water on demand, this alone would be a terrifying gamble with every single sip. Beyond disease, the very structure of the castle itself would pose 1,000 dangers. These were not built with safety codes in mind, but for defense and utility. You would navigate dark, uneven stone staircases, often spiral and unlit, where a single misstep could send you tumbling to a broken neck or cracked skull. Imagine carrying a heavy load up or down these treacherous steps, your footing uncertain, your vision obscured by flickering torchlight or the gloom of a windowless passage. Working at height was an everyday occurrence. Repairing battlements, cleaning roofs, hanging tapestries. There were no safety harnesses, no scaffolding built to modern standards. One slip, one moment of dizziness, and you would plunge to your death on the unforgiving flagstones below. Heavy objects were constantly being moved. Massive timbers, sacks of grain, stone blocks for repairs. A dropped load, a snapping rope, a faulty winch could crush you in an instant. The portcullis, a monumental gate designed to deter invaders, could descend with fatal speed if its mechanism failed, or if you were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The kitchen, far from being a place of culinary delight, would be a furnace of danger. Open fires roared day and night, capable of igniting clothing, hair, or the wooden beams overhead in a flash. Massive cauldrons of boiling water or stew could scald you beyond recognition. Sharp knives and cleavers were handled with speed and little regard for safety. A simple burn or a deep cut, if not properly treated, would quickly fester, turning septic, leading to a slow, agonizing death. Remember, there were no antibiotics. A minor infection could kill you. Animals, too, would contribute to the daily dangers. Horses, vital for transport and warfare, were powerful, unpredictable beasts whose kick could shatter bones. Guard dogs, often large and fierce, could bite. Even farm animals within the bailey could inflict injury if mishandled. Then there is the threat of violence, both intentional and accidental. Weapons were everywhere. Swords, axes, daggers, bows, and arrows were tools of the trade, constantly being cleaned, sharpened, and handled. An accidental jab during training, a slip while carrying a sheathed weapon, or a moment of carelessness could inflict a wound that would quickly become infected and deadly. Life in a confined, hierarchical society, fueled by alcohol and simmering resentments, often led to brawls. These disputes could escalate quickly, with a punch leading to a fall on a hard surface, or a simple argument ending with a blade drawn. Justice for you, a commoner, would be swift and brutal. Punishments for even minor infractions could be severe: flogging, mutilation, or even execution. The fear of being accused, rightly or wrongly, of theft, insubordination, or witchcraft would hang over your head like a tangible weight. And even if the castle was not under direct siege, the outside world remained a perilous place. Foraging parties, patrols, or simple trips outside the walls could expose you to bandits, rival lords, or wild animals. Hunting, a sport for the nobles, was a dangerous activity in itself, with injuries from bows, arrows, or encounters with boars and bears being all too common. Finally, we must confront the brutal truth of medieval medicine, or rather the lack thereof. Doctors, often untrained by modern standards, relied on practices like bloodletting, purging, and the application of strange concoctions of herbs and animal parts. Surgery was a horrific last resort, performed without anesthesia or antiseptics, typically resulting in overwhelming infection and agonizing death. A broken bone, a deep cut, or even a persistent cough could easily become a death sentence. There was no understanding of internal organs, no concept of sterility. Childbirth, for women, was a terrifying ordeal with a high chance of fatality for both mother and child. So, you see, the medieval castle was not a safe haven. It was a fortress against external enemies, yes, but a constant, internal war zone against unseen pathogens, predictable accidents, and the ever-present threat of violence. Your modern understanding of safety, hygiene, and medical care would leave you utterly unprepared for the daily gauntlet of dangers. You would not last a day. You would be overwhelmed not just by the psychological burden, but by the relentless physical assault of a world where the Grim Reaper walked openly, waiting patiently for his next claim.